I'm a percussionist, orchestral percussionist. I did the first gig or the first rehearsal, and obviously I missed by half an inch to hit the cymbal or the triangle. But what was the problem? Apart from I can't talk as normal as I can now, but there was no enjoyment the music by playing music. Before, it's every day and I loved it entirely. And I'm going to be whistled down the corridor to the tunes that we're going to be playing or rehearse.
Hi, and welcome everybody, and we hope you enjoy this podcast called On the Tip of My Tongue. Now, I'm Rob Edwards.
And I'm Jonathan Hirons.
And this podcast is a follow-up to a film which Jonathan made about aphasia. So, what is aphasia? Well, it's a condition caused by some kind of injury to the brain, which is often, could be a stroke, or could be just falling off a bike. And it affects your ability to use language in all its forms. Speaking, writing, reading, sending text, whatever. 350,000 people in the UK suffer from a debilitating condition called aphasia. Fewer than half this number suffer from Parkinson's, and yet most people have heard of Parkinson's, whilst almost nobody has heard of aphasia. Hi everybody, and today we're welcoming Graham Hall to the On the Tip of My Tongue podcast. Welcome, Graham. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for giving your time so generously. Perhaps, Graham, I know that you worked for Opera North for a long time. I know you had a stroke. Perhaps just tell us a little bit about what happened.
It was 10 years ago. No problems before. There were no health problems. But I woke up and my wife tried to get me awake and there was no response. And I talking gobbled. And so she went to the hospital and they came back quite quickly, 10 minutes after it happens. It's a hospital in Mansfield. And what happened was the left middle artery blockage. So my right arm, my right hand, right leg was not working at all. No speech at all, apart from, and some drooping, obviously, on my left side, my right side. Yeah, so I was I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks and then home for 6 or 7 months off from work, and did every when it first started, I've had language therapy for 2 weeks every day. And then it goes into 2 weeks, every 2 days every week for 6 months, which is fantastic. I don't think that happens now. I was quite lucky at that time and that area with the speech and language therapist was fantastic team around me, and some digital therapy as well. And then I tried to get back to playing, a bit of playing after 7 months. I'm a percussionist, orchestral percussionist, so clock, timbs, cymbals, bass drum. So that I did the first gig or the first rehearsal, I say, for that. And obviously I missed by half an inch to hit the cymbal or the triangle or something like that. But what was the problem? Apart from I can't talk as normal as I can now, but there was no enjoyment the music by playing music. I mean, before, it's every day and I loved it entirely. And I'm going to be whistled down the corridor to the tunes that we're going to be playing or rehearse. So I know what it was after that day, or when I tried to get some playing back, rehearsals back. I know I was looking around thinking, what's happened here? And there was no feedback from the enjoyment, from the chills you get up the back of your neck. So that's the hardest thing. Apart from, of course, as you can hear, my speech sometimes a bit blurry, a bit up and down. But now and I know it's better than it was, but it's something that I always want to get better. So I just practice it. That's what it is.
Did you get back to being able to play competently or as well as you could? That
Well,
went in
sort of. I
itself?
mean, when I get back, a phrased return, there was concerts, kids' concerts, and an opera by Wagner, which you only play off stage for the last act, and some Mahler 4, and it's okay. I know it was. Obviously, I'm not. I've stopped playing for 6 months, but I realised that where I live, I'm an hour and a half away from Leeds, so that's a problem with the driving. Although first time, 2 or 3 times, my wife drove me in and back, but it's just the stamina of driving, playing, talking to other people, which is the hardest thing. And so I decided to stop after that. And for a year afterwards, I didn't play at all. But 8 years after that, I was seeing my friend playing at the back of this church. And I said, actually, I would like to play again and get some level back. So I did a bit of playing for Opera North, and mainly by a chamber orchestra called Sinfonia Viva, which is based in Derby. And I played some timpani and some percussions like that, a gig every a couple of months, something like that. And I think now it is my playing is, but it's still the problem.
I see. That sounds awful, if I may say. Obviously, you're a professional musician too. I know your top draw. You were probably still are top draw player. You have to be be in an orchestra for Opera North or whatever.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've devoted so much of your life to music, and you love it, obviously.
Yeah.
Or loved it in the past, and that has just gone, has it? What about listening to music? Is that okay?
Right. There's no music in the house at all. Now, my wife is a musician anyway. She's a violinist. So this is a bit odd. But the way I get enjoyment from music is not by hearing it, but by laying out parts, arranging, orchestrating. So music preparation side of it. So I can obviously get the tune put into a string quartet or a brass or a ensemble or whatever it is. And I can see the music, and I can make sure that the harmonic fits with the score, the parts, or the individual instruments. And I got to play it back sometime to make sure the notes are correct. But apart from that, I don't necessarily want to hear it in total because I know what it will sound like because I was doing it previous to my stroke.
One question occurs to me when you were talking earlier, Graham, was has your timing gone? Did your timing go, shall I say?
The first 2 or 3 months, I would miss by a cymbal, by an inch or something like that.
Right.
Even though now, when I do a bit of playing, I've got to look down a bit and make sure that is there. So not look at the conductor, not necessarily, but look at the instrument and saying it's there. And also make sure that's quiet or loud, because I know how it would look like, not necessarily how it will sound like. Just before lockdown started, I did the La Bohème opera for Upper North in Leeds and on tour. And I was using my old part before I stopped full-time. So playing in the pit, playing off stage, marching into the stage, getting out again, some more off bells, and then back in the pit. Now that I've been using that part, I've been playing for 25 years, every 2 or 3 years. So the part was ingrained into me. So I know exactly where it will be, how it will work either from my end, but also from the conductor's end. So it was procedural memory kicks in. But if it's a new opera or a new production with different production like that will be the hardest thing. But it was great. It was a great run for it. But I get enjoyment because I was doing it, not from hearing it.
But it's strange. It does make sense, but it's a very strange thing for you to come to this pass. As Rob said, you've been a professional musician for donkey's years, and suddenly it's kind of left you, really, hasn't it?
I've got books and books on the brain, and books on the brain and music, of course. And there's a great book by Oliver Sacks called Aphasia, and there's the chapters on music and how it affects people with brain damage. And I thought it was amusia, which is people liking music, but it's not me, because I don't hate music at all. It's more musical adonia, which means you get no enjoyment from hearing anything about music. So I can see what it is, I know how it works, that's fine, but there's no oomph, but it's fine, because I've worked for music now, and that's great. Of course, I know how to do it with the software, and that's fantastic, because I've got new ideas and how to fit the parts in or out.
So you know the technique and the technology is with you. It's just that it doesn't thrill you with in the way that it used to.
It doesn't bother me at all, actually. It
doesn't bother you.
People you say it was odd, but I know you're not the only person that said that to me. But I get that's fine, actually, because I can work. Well, at work I can a bit of work like that, and I can play if I want to do, and I talk to people that I want to talk to. I can work at the level that I want to do it. Because of my stroke, it's always the problem with mental fatigue and stamina like that. It's always the problem with any brain damaged people, I guess. Yeah.
At the end of the day, you get tired, presumably.
Yes, and sometimes when I'm working, I've got to some work for an hour or something like that. After that, my speech is low. I can't talk. Right. Your brain globally, so left or right, and sometimes there'll be a stop and say, I can't do that. I can't talk now. Wait for half an hour and then come back to me.
That's quite common, isn't it?
Aphasia, I mean, aphasia is a booger. It's really a booger.
We're stuck with it, unfortunately.
I'm much better than it used to be. And I've got some audio files on my phone when I was talking to my phone. So I know how it was before and how bad it was before. And maybe 5 years afterwards, I was still thinking, my speech is so bad, I can't talk at all. I realised that actually my speech is much better. And I'm talking to you and Rob, that's fantastic. I couldn't have done that years ago, 3 years ago, at this level. But when I stop and think about what I've got to say late in the next sentence, then I can't find the words to describe it. So I don't want to. So it's more, it is now more automatic for speaking. Right. Whereas before it was really hard, and stamina-wise it's really difficult.
People say this to me. If they don't know you, do they realise there's anything wrong with your speech?
Strangely, I've been talking to some students in Derby, the hospital, on their 5th year, and they're testing different people with brain damage or brain problems, Parkinson's or my aphasia or anything like that. But the questions they asked to me, they never asked me about speech. So they can't tell what's the problem with me because they can't talk and ask me to play a sentence or to write a sentence they've just said. I can't do that at all. But of course, on that list that I've got to do a module, they won't know that I've got aphasia. And then when I and the group and say about aphasia is, and then they see what's the problem with language and sounds, and then they realise what's happened to me. But over 2 or 3 sessions, there's about 20 or 30 students. Only 2 people have heard of aphasia, and that is their 5th year of being a doctor.
That's really why Jonathan started the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
To try and raise awareness.
Yeah.
Because nobody's, that's what we keep saying on the podcast, that nobody seems to have heard of it.
And we're talking about people who are in their fifth medical year. Yeah. Not that even they haven't heard about it. So much not much chance with anybody else, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think then they realised that I had a stroke because my right side is a bit limp, and also in the test for that, the strength is less on my right side. So they realised I had a stroke. But apart from that, they wouldn't know. Quite simply because of funding, I guess. I used to do some students at Sheffield, the speech and language therapy course. And every 2 or 3 months, I go and talk to other people and other people with aphasia, different types of aphasia. And that was great for them to realise how language impacts a person's life, but also the different types of aphasia. But because of lockdown haps and funding, they've stopped, which seems bizarre, because people have got to know about aphasia. And particularly if you come with the speech and language therapist, which is a great career, it'd be great if you can talk to a person that's got it so they can realise how they can cope or not cope.
Loving the podcast? Subscribe for more episodes and support the journey. Your donations help keep the show thriving. Please go to tipofmytonguefilm.com. Thank you for being part of our community.
One of the things that we're starting to talk about, and I've got a podcast coming up with Headway to talk about brain injury. And one of the things that we're trying to get people to understand is that there are people who have aphasia who are still of working age and are finding it difficult to get back into work.
Yeah.
And you're a pretty good example of someone who's managed to overcome your aphasia enough to be able to do some sort of the work that you used to do in a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to Headway about this particular subject because they're quite keen on this, not just for aphasia, but for anybody with head injuries. So for people to get back to work, because if you're, and we have talked to people who are in their 30s who've got another 30 years of work in front, but employers don't want to take the risk. And I think it is a risk of taking somebody on because something might happen on their watch.
I was quite fortunate up north. I got 6 months off, which is fine, and then gradually get better. I know that the management at that time would help me as much as I can to get better and sort of try to get better at some point for the future. Maybe half time or something like that. No problem with the management side, but it's just my mind. I don't want to be as a bad player as I was. Now that bad player is in my head, not necessarily the person that was sitting sort of next to me. Chris, my friend, says, you said when I was back, he said, well, you're playing is as good or as bad as before. But obviously, it's internally, I know there was a problem. Not before my stroke happened. I was choosing some library work for laying out parts and scores and orchestrating that stuff. So I've been doing that for 20 years before my stroke happened.
Obviously, therefore, you've got some sort of input into this because, you've come back to work that you did before your stroke. So you're arranging and so on and so forth. Yeah. So you're carrying on to work. The only difference between maybe you and some others is, of course, I assume you're freelance. So therefore, it's a slightly different situation as if you're going to work for a company. Yeah. Somebody else made the same point on the previous podcast. He said, well, companies don't want to take the risk in case something happens to you on their watch. And, of course, they will be liable.
Yeah, I get that.
And I don't know whether Opera North would have the same view on that with you. Perhaps you don't know the answer to that, but
the organisation Opera North is quite good to help people. Any problems get back, and even there's a problem with their health. Right. They'll get off for 6 months and then half time, like that. And then gradually get better or less, depending on the skills of that particular player, and also where that player sits in the orchestra.
I think we've done here on that particular point. I think you've got some input into it, and as I say, we're going to kind of wrap the idea up into something later that we'll talk about people's. What would say self-worth is not the right word really, but we want people to feel that they've got some contribution.
Of course,
even though it may not be a paid position, but they want to have some input into the community, that sort of thing.
I think there's more funding, strangely, for people that has neuro problems than before.
Yeah,
because there's funding for that.
Yeah,
which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. But I think neurodiversity is much more the key word these days.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's good, I guess.
We all get lumped into the same pot, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's
what it is.
Yeah.
You're doing orchestration work now. Obviously. Yeah. So you're not still working for Opera North.
Oh no.
Although you may get commissions from them to do something.
I work for Opera North at sometimes. Not last time I worked was a year ago, maybe at that. But before I've been some library works like that, and even with the Symphonia Viva, it's for laying out parts and score and like that, or new arrangements, or for different people. So it's freelance work. But actually, I always think music was always about freelance anyway. You never know where your next gig will be. So you've got to know what that mindset is. Right. I mean, it's a bit like acting.
And that's what you mainly do now. Plus a little bit of performing every now.
I guess that's my gig these days, which is fine. But also, it gives me the time to think about how the brain works or doesn't work. And I said, you got books on the brain and music, and also I'm more on with the language side of it. You never think about how language works unless it won't matter in your head. It's fantastic what we've got, and so I want to know about what's happened to me and why it's happened to me. Not because of my stroke, but because of the neural pathways, how that would work or not work. Or how they work together or not work. I've done 6 or 7 studies on aphasia on Manchester University, and also they moved now to Cambridge. And sometimes they get some tasks and they put me in the scanner and figure out what lights up or what's light down. And that's aphasia talking now. You have to mean.
Yes, I know what you mean. What doesn't light up?
That's
what stays.
Exactly. But also, of course, what works underneath the damage. Because you get the MRI scan, it's just black. And anyone who would look in that scan was saying, as a doctor said, you realise that scan, Graham will not talk now, ever. So even though the scan is quite black, there is working below the damage. And being a musician, all musicians, but particularly professional musicians, are using your brain left or right. When it happened, some of the language processes moved to my right side. So it's not as fluent as it was, but it gets language, how that words sound like. Music works for different brain regions. Includes working memory, decision-making, motor coordination, hand-or coordination, memory, low-term memory, conceptions, consemic knowledge, emotional circuitry, the control of meaning and space, global and detailed perception, strategies, sustained attention, and other things. That's what the brain works for a musician. Not as fully as it used to be, but it will work. And gradually the brain works out what's happened. And what happens for me is my speech gets better because I've got a musician's brain. It's always strange that I'm talking about my left damaged brain about my left damaged brain. And isn't that quite incredible how the brain works?
Yeah.
There's 2 books by Norman Deutsch called The Brain's Way of Healing and The Brain That Changes Itself. And that he written in 2013, 14. And basically that's about neuroplasticity.
Right.
That's how that works.
Quick question that just occurred to me while you were talking is, when did you know you had aphasia? When were you told in the timeline? Did you know straight away? Were you told straight away?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, because obviously when I was 2 or 3 days in an IC ward, I think I was told. I can't remember because I hear it, but my wife was told this is aphasia.
The reason why I ask is because we had somebody in the last podcast, and the hospital didn't know what was wrong with
Really?
it. No, and it took some months, I think, before they worked out that he'd had a stroke. Yeah, honestly, this is
Was this Nigel?
This is Nigel. Yeah, or his wife says that they didn't. They sent him home and said, "Well, we don't know what's wrong with you." They didn't think it was. They didn't know it was a stroke, or didn't say it was a stroke.
Right.
They kind of got back to the hospital and said, this is not right. You need to have another look at him. And it was some months, I think, before he realised that why he was like he was because of aphasia. Like you, I knew, I was told straight away. Within 48 hours.
Yeah.
Because they did a scan, and
after the first 2 or 3 days in the hospital, they started language therapy.
Yeah.
But it was only about a half an hour a day. But I used to practice on my own by practicing and spelling words and trying to spell words and not trying to spell words. You don't want to just use the topics you want to do and then stop for an hour. You've got to go on and on and on and on. You can't just do 2 hours for a week and then think it'll be better.
You have to use it all the time.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
No, exactly.
And that's probably why you and I and many others do get back to some sort of...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because if you don't use it, you lose it, as they say.
Well, yeah, and also because a musician, like myself, you want to get better. Whatever, or what the part you're doing, or the music it is, you want to get better for that part, or for the section you're within it, or the orchestra, or the chorus, or the audience. So you've got to get practice, otherwise you won't get work, actually.
Or you won't get better. Or you won't be able to function.
Did you get support from your family, Graham?
Oh, yeah, my wife is incredible.
Yep.
We haven't got kids, but she was, is and still is fantastic to me. I don't know if I won't have that person next to me from day one, I won't be there now. I'm sure of it. Because we love each other, so obviously, but also she's a musician as well at a professional level, so she knows how music works or doesn't work. So she knows how to figure out problems and get it so that the concert is correct. Many times with people, problems with their marriage because that person or family don't understand or won't understand what's happening with a brain damage. My mum, she doesn't really get what's happened to me. She'll be 70, nearly 80 when it happened. So she really, really don't understand what's happened to me. And other people's friends don't really get what aphasia is. All the musicians I've got know exactly what's happened, and they try to cope with me and make sure and how my language works. People that aren't musicians, a couple of people, they don't get it at all. But it's good. That person I met nearly 30 years ago, I'm glad I met her, actually.
That's a wonderful thing to say.
Yeah. And it's just remarkable that she's still there.
Well, she loves you.
Well, yeah.
She thinks you're worth it.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
But is there anything else you want to say? Before?
Well, the only thing I say that the way I get people with strokes or brain damaged person, they want to know, other people know what's happened to them. What I do is, because of the work I'm doing with the music preparation side of it, is there's a piece of music I've got some lyrics. I get rid of the original lyrics and put new lyrics to describe. So, for example, Georgia on your mind is aphasia on your mind. And oh, I do like to be beside the seaside is the legion on the region. Send in the clowns, which is, and now it's send in the nouns. They're all on this website called graham.hall.bandcamp.com, and all is on that thing, which you can hear it, and with the lyrics. I'm not singing it because my playing is really bad. I'm now about a semi-quaver, sharp or flat. So I've used some software. It's a good bit of software, actually, a Japanese thing, and different male or female or vocal or operatic or rock or something like that. And you can figure it out, the sound. And so that's how I did it. And I think when people hear that, they can maybe get a glimpse of how sound works for me.
Does this software you were talking about, does it make you sing in tune? I could do with that. I could do it. I could get my career going again.
You get your Bob Dylan songbook out as well, and you're off. Graham, it's been great fun. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. And thank you. Well, your insight as well.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, thank you, Graham. It's been quite inspiring listening to you. Fascinating. Yeah. All power to your elbow, mate, if I may say that. And yeah, it's been absolutely great.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks very much, Graham.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Aphasia, it's always on my mind. Disorder of the brain, dismember thoughts and rhyme. My kerfuffle, a physical struggle, as brain and mind converge. It's neurocontrapuntal that keeps me in the line.
Thank you for listening to this On the Tip of My Tongue podcast. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Now, if you want more help and information about strokes and aphasia, please go to stroke.org.uk. Say Aphasia, that's S-A-Y, aphasia, all one word, .org, or the aphasia page of nhs.uk. That was On the Tip of My Tongue, the podcast dedicated to raising awareness about aphasia. To listen to more episodes, click on Support the Show in the description. This has been a Buffalo Lounge production. Please follow Buffalo Lounge on all the socials.